Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I'm your host, Chris Gargano, and the fireside chats this summer continue with Dan Graca, ESPN Radio, Jets pre- and post-game radio host. Today, we are going to talk about, in the middle of the summer, the Tom Brady jersey retirement that just took place. We'll get Dan's reactions. We'll also talk about the start of NFL training camps and the Major League Baseball All-Star game. A wonderful conversation about overcoming adversity, getting ready for the season, and just let's get back in touch with Dan Graca, who provides some great insight. The conversation begins now with Dan Graca on Keep the Line Moving. I want to talk about Tom Brady, the number being retired in the rafters in Foxborough, and the ceremony and the message that he had in his speech. Listen, I know you're a Jets fan. I know this is hard for you sometimes to talk about, but you got to give the guy respect. But I want to hear your opinion of what's going on, and then I'll give you mine.
I mean, the Jets created Tom Brady. Let's face it. We all know that story. It was many moons ago. But yeah, Tom Brady wouldn't have had that night if it wasn't for the Jets, some 23 years ago or whatever it was. But no, all jokes aside, you give the guys credit for everything that, he accomplished certainly in his career. And it's amazing because it looked like it could have been a concert up there at Gillette Stadium, right? The place was sold out. They had the stage set up there. And I don't know how many athletes in our American team sports society would be able to engineer something like that to where like fans would actually flock to a stadium, 50,000 plus strong to not see a game, but just to see a guy sit on a stage and be interviewed by different luminaries and everybody coming back with that. So it really, really is cool. You could probably, you don't even need probably your full hand to be able to count all the people that could make that happen. So it really just speaks to, the power of what, Tom Brady, and I guess doing it in one place for 20 years, the level that they did probably lend some credence to that. But it's remarkable. That's really the only word that I could come up with. It's remarkable to, do that. And then to get all those people back. I'm not just talking about the fans, but the people that showed up on the stage, right? Whether it was Belichick, all the former teammates, Peyton Manning showing up and sitting down. Think about that, a rival, right? A rival showing up and giving his time there. So remarkable, really was.
Well put, Dan. And what I saw there was actually the respect that he has garnered in football. And obviously the stadium's located in Foxborough in the heart of the New England Patriot Nation, right? But you could just feel it. Peyton Manning showed up and the things that were said about Tom on the evening. Tom Brady had a message, and you probably, again, saw it on social media. It's a 2-minute clip where he was talking about football is hard. And he talked about growing up in San Mateo, California, two-a-days, getting hit by bigger players, and talking about that it's a metaphor that life is hard. And the people that succeed are the ones that go through that, right? And come out on the other side. You don't have to be special to be great. You just have to be dedicated. What did you think when you saw that message?
Well, it actually hit home, and I know exactly the clip that you're talking about because, he said, I would encourage everybody to play football because football's hard, right? And it teaches you life lessons. And what struck me was, he used the example of, in the off season, he was up at, 6 a.m. going out doing workouts, whereas his friends were sleeping in and eating pancakes. And then I thought, well, I was the guy eating pancakes. I like pancakes. And
Right.
So if not for the pancakes, maybe I would have been in the NFL one day. Who knows? No, but I'm only kidding. No, it's a valuable lesson, as you said, you translate that to life and work and whatever your vocation is, right? Nothing comes easy. You're going to have to put in the time. You could be the most talented and, have the abilities, but that's only going to get you so far, right? You have to put in the work. You have to try to go that extra mile. And you think about all the people that have been supremely successful, in life, not just in sports, but it could be in anything. And a lot of them are going to say, I outworked so-and-so. I knew I had to work harder than everybody else. That's the common theme that kind of translates from profession to profession. The ones that are successful are the ones that, are doing things, let's say, when the sun is down and maybe other people are sleeping, but putting in that little extra effort, which, there aren't any rules that says you can't put in as much work as possible.
And it makes it more rewarding, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
When you put in that work and you overcome the adversity, whether it is football, to Tom's point, or life, right? And not to be preachy here, but when you have overcome adversity through the hard work, whatever you achieve is so much more sweet, right? And it gives you confidence to do it again and again and again. Like you said, whatever your vocation is, it doesn't matter. And the hard work. And I love that message. And that's when, and his kids were there, his parents were there, everybody was there. The place was sold out. And you hear, young athletes are watching now. Why would one win 6 Super Bowls, have their number retired, future Hall of Famer, a 7th with Tampa Bay? Those are the reasons. The guy, you cannot say anything other than he was a monumentally hard worker. And you respect that.
And absolutely. And, you think about how many, I don't want to say generations, but, you think about playing for 20 years and doing it at a consistently high level. Think about how many new cycles of teams you're going through, even when he stayed in one place. New England all those years, those first 3 championships were with one core of players, right? Then they had to reload on the fly, but he was the constant denominator, he and the head coach. And then they got younger players into the league. So then he's the older guy. And then they won championships there. And then they had to reload again. And then they ended up winning a couple of more, for example. And then he's even older than some of the new guys who are coming in and all contributing to that common goal of winning a championship. And then pack up, go down to a new setting, where he was so familiar with everything for 2 decades. And then he goes to Tampa Bay, boom, the first season, as you said, during a pandemic, mind you, right, where you didn't have all the same bells and whistles of the off season that you normally are accustomed to. And, you heard those stories about him trying to build a relationship and some camaraderie with his new teammates, having to organize these throwing sessions in some public park down in Florida, which was, you couldn't even do at that time because of all the laws that were going on. And, they had to put the kibosh on that. And then to still win a championship was incredible. You don't, as I said before, you don't accomplish these things without hard work, because you don't last for 2 decades if you're not putting the time. Because, you know this. We've watched athletes who are really, really gifted and talented, but it only lasts for a certain amount of time because they're not willing to put in all those extra hours to remain great at their craft.
Exactly. And you only have one shot at this life. You might as
Mm-hmm.
well work hard to achieve. All right. To that point, NFL training camps are starting up in a couple of weeks. And this is a very exciting time of year for football fans, for any sports fan, right? It's a great renewal of the sport. So you look at this, they have a fresh start. Everybody is 0-0. Everybody has championship aspirations. What differentiates the teams that succeed? Because this is a building block. Training camp is a month, 6 weeks of a building block to kick off the opener, right? What differentiates a great team, a mid-range team, and a team that perpetually struggles with that time frame? What do you think in the preparation for the season gets teams to where they think and perhaps should go?
Well, talent helps, right? First and foremost, especially at, a couple of key positions. I think you and I have talked about this in the past too, that especially in a sport like the NFL, like it helps to have that quarterback. I'll say you really don't have a chance unless you have that guy. The guy that if something breaks down behind you or in front of you, he's going to be there to cover your mistakes. So I think, talent at key spots is number one, but I think that culture is also a big part of it because you said you have your excellent teams, you have your, so-so teams, then you have your bad teams. That's a mindset though, right? Back to the Brady thing with New England. You heard all about that culture and that Patriot way, which, I think might be overstated to a certain extent, especially in those later years, because, you could talk about the Patriot way all you want, but if you don't have the players to be able to execute it, it means nothing. But I do think that culture and mindset are big. If you're a losing team, if you're a losing franchise, and then that just perpetuates all throughout the building from one year to the next, it means something. It really and truly does, because I think it takes more than just, let's say, one good year to change that. You have to be able to stack up multiple seasons of where it looks like, okay, we figured this thing out, to where not just the existing players or anybody else in the organization, new guys that come in, they know what the standard is supposed to be. They know what the expectations are supposed to be. For example, you could be the number 1 pick in the draft, Sometimes that ain't good enough when you get into professional sports, right? You could be that player. You could walk into a losing program and nothing changes because the culture is able to dwarf in even a supreme talent, for example. So that's why I think it's really, really important. And that's why, like with football, you know this, the ultimate team game, right? It's not just about one guy. It's about so much more than that. You know, basketball, you might be able to get away with that. You put a LeBron James or whoever, like, you know, the stud prospect coming into the league is, you put him on a team, one player on the court out of five, you could change things around. But it doesn't work that way in football, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't work that way in baseball either.
It doesn't. And you know, you said it perfectly. The culture and mindset can elevate. Right now, you didn't say this, but you implied mediocre talent or slightly
Right.
above average talent. Culture and mindset is strong, as it was revealed in New England all those years, right?
I was also going to throw in the example of, you know, another like all-time iconic legend who we just lost recently, in Jerry West. You know, the logo. And I know I brought up basketball, and that's the thing, but you think about Jerry West. I said, you know, I've always thought that Jerry West's playing career was almost underrated. And this is a guy who's the logo. But if, you know, for those that didn't see him play, for example, they're going to look at a guy, because there's certain things that just we get consumed with when evaluating somebody's legacy, where they're going to look at a guy who, um, you know, only won one championship, just one. You know, he was 1-8 all time in the finals. And so, like, to some people, they look at that and say, oh, he wasn't clutch, you know, because he only won one championship. But no, his nickname was Mr. Clutch, right? And people don't realize that. But even in a sport like basketball, where you are just 1 of 5 and you could be the best player on the floor, sometimes it's not good enough. You still need those other guys to be able to do their part. And Jerry West, unfortunately, in those Lakers teams ran into, you know, those all-time legendary Celtic squads 6 times in the NBA Finals. You know, ran into, you know, those New York Knicks teams where he lost a couple of NBA championships to them. But Jerry West was also the only guy in the history of the NBA, Chris, to be named the MVP of the finals on a losing team. You know, that's how good you are. You know, the guy was the all-time leading scorer in the NBA Finals. Not LeBron James, not Michael Jordan, you know, Jerry West. And it's funny because, you know, people look at legacies a little bit different, because you see a guy like that who only has one championship. It's just weird how the message kind of gets appreciated or unappreciated over the course of history when you're evaluating somebody's legacy. That's one of those like things that kind of gnaws at me when we talk sports and athletes and that type of thing.
That's a great point, and I'm so glad you brought up the legend, Jerry West, the logo. And those Laker teams were fantastic, and they went up against Bill Russell and Cousy and all those guys. They were so good. Bill Russell does not get enough attention as one of the greatest of all time.
Greatest winner, perhaps, of all time.
Absolutely. And then you look at Phil Jackson was on those Knick teams, and people don't realize that. He was hurt one year, but then, you know, talk about building of a legend and winning 2 championships and then his 11 rings and such. Okay, you mentioned baseball. Finally here, Dan, the Major League Baseball All-Star game. When I was a little kid, I used to record it every year and then watch it in the wintertime because it gave you all the players, right? You could see the Garveys and the Jack Clarks and all those teams that, you know, obviously I was out in the West, and, you know, the Padres and the A's and all those wonderful Yankee teams. Let me ask you, what do you think of the Major League Baseball All-Star game, which will be played in Texas this year? Tell me about it.
Oh, there's a lot of things I could say about the All-Star game. Where do you want me to start?
It's tremendous. It's just the fanfare and the time of year. There's something about it.
Look, I clearly, and I think you and I probably have talked about this, you know, at one time or another. Out of the 4 major sports, it's by far the best All-Star game, because I think that baseball, just at its purest form, is a sport that you can't really manipulate. You can't go through the motions because it's way too obvious. Like the Pro Bowl, that thing ran its course because nobody wanted to tackle, nobody wanted to get hit. It became a joke. NBA All-Star game, nobody plays any defense. You know, it looks like a video game that you're watching. You know, the Hockey All-Star game I don't think is bad, but they've made that kind of hokey with a 3-on-3 format, which, you know, works for some. But no, the Baseball All-Star game is indeed still a pure baseball game, which is great to see. You see guys out there trying hard, and you appreciate that. I hate the fact that they have uniforms now for the All-Star game because growing up all those years, one of the coolest things was seeing all these different stars, the best players in the game, in their team uniforms. You looked forward to that. You know what I mean? Because remember, like when we were growing up and developing our affinity for baseball, there was no satellite TV, there was no direct TV or extra innings or any of that stuff. So you didn't get to watch any game you wanted to. The only time you saw guys who, played on the other side of the country or whatnot was, maybe the game of the week, which was one game and who knew, or definitely the All-Star game. And that's what was cool about it. You got to see all these guys on the field at the same time. So I think that novelty is gone a little bit. But I still look forward to the All-Star game, maybe not as much as you did when you were a kid because it's changed so much, like I said, but it still has the title of being the best All-Star game out of the four sports, that's for sure.
I'm with you on that, my friend, with all due respect to the other sports. Dan, a wonderful visit. I love catching up with you in the middle of the summer. Can't wait to hear your work nightly as well as with the New York Jets pre and post. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Dan.
Anytime, my friend.
And we thank Dan very much for being on the show. Have a great week, everybody, on Keep the Line Moving. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwhal, have a great week, everybody.